Alright, in this lesson we'll continue our exploration of the unstack method, and I'll introduce you to a wide combination of arguments that you can provide to the method to affect which of the indexes in the multi-index is going to be moved to the columns axis. So let's begin by executing our code to import our world.stat.csv, and we're once again going to have to stack it into a series just to keep things fun. So I'm going to call that world.stack method. There is our 3-level series. I'm going to store it once again in a variable called s and preview my first 3 rows. And there we have it. So in the last lesson we practiced calling the unstack method. In fact, we method chained it a couple times. And as I explained, the default process is always to begin with the most inner layer, the most inner level, and move that to the columns index. Well, as it turns out, you can provide an argument to the unstack method. In fact, you can provide a different combination of arguments, and I just wanted to show you what those options are. So I'm going to once again call the unstack method, but instead of giving it kind of the default, which we did last time, I'm now going to give it a wide combination of numbers. So what we can do is provide the index that we want to move from our multi-index. And each one of these levels or layers within our multi-index receives its own index position, so to speak, within the larger multi-index. Basically, just like with everything else in pandas, everything is numbered and everything starts counting at 0. So this outer layer, which is country, is going to have an index position of 0 within our multi-index. This year section or layer is going to have an index position of 1 among our multi-index, our row multi-index index. And finally, this last one, which doesn't have an actual column name, is going to have an index position of 2. So by default, it's going to proceed with this one first, so it's the same as writing unstack and providing an argument of 2. I can demonstrate that to you. You can see that it's going to take the population GDP level, which has an index position of 2, and move it here to be our columns. But what we can do is provide an alternate argument. For example, if we wanted to take this country level and move it while still preserving this inner multi-index of the year and the statistic, if we provide an argument like 0 here, what it's going to do compared to this one is take our country level, our country layer, and move it here. So now it's part of our columns. But here you can see we've retained that multi-index, but now it's going to be year and either population or GDP, which represents this information right here. And similarly, if I provide an argument of 1, which represents the index position related to the year section here, it's going to take that year, kind of pull it out, and then put it or unstack it on the column level. So now if I pull that one out, you'll see that country will be retained as the row index, as the first level of the row index. And we also have the statistic here, population and GDP. But now my column names up here are going to be my year values, and it's going to repeat all the way until we reach the end. So as you can see, we can provide a different numeric argument to the unstack method to specify which level or layer of my multi-index I want to migrate. Well, as it turns out, we can also provide numeric arguments to the index, to the unstack method that we call on our multi-index object. And in this example, I'm calling it on a series, but the same methodology applies if it was a data frame. So what I can do is provide negative arguments, and that's basically going to proceed in backwards order. So for example, if I put -1, that's going to start basically at this end and move backwards. So -1 is referring to my population GDP level. It's the same thing to write -1 here or to write 2 in this case. 2 is this column or this layer again, 0, then 1, then 2. Or it's -1 from the end. It's 1 back from the end of the line. So this is basically going to be giving me the exact same thing. It's going to move the population and GDP to the columns level. So this command that I just typed is identical to writing this. And you can see when I execute there's no difference. And similarly, if I want to move 2 back and write -2, that's going to take out my year index and move it to the top. So this code right here is identical to writing this, a 1, because it is an index position of 1. And predictably, this final option, which is unstack -3, represents, here's -1, here's -2, -3. That represents that country index. So this code, which is going to give me this result where the country index is moved to the columns, is the exact same thing as writing s unstack 0. So there you have it. And finally, I'm just going to collapse this. There's one additional option, which if our indexes have names, you can also just write the string name of the index level that you'd like to move. So in our case, this column that we created here in the series does not have a name, but these two do. This index, this first outer layer, has a name of country, and this second layer, the first inner layer, has a name of year. So if I write S unstack, and I provide it an argument of, let's say, year, it's once again going to take out this layer, this chunk, this piece, and move it to the columns. So there you have it, another way to move the years. And similarly, if I replace this year with country, it's going to focus on this level or layer of my multi-index. It's going to take that out from the rows and move it to my columns. So now you can see that country is going to be moved and placed here on my columns axis, while the other two are going to be kept in place. So that's just a couple different arguments that we can provide, both numeric, positive, and negative integers, as well as the name of the actual index levels. And we can pass any of these different arguments to the unstack method to modify how it's going to migrate or move one of those levels in the multi-index to the columns axis. And in the next lesson, we'll continue chipping away at the unstack method.